Crash.
Yeah.
Yeah, the
The crash
crash.
happened.
And here we are, little Jones Studio with the largest construction project in Arizona. And all of our best architects being laid off or shutting their doors. So we cherry picked all the best architects. And over the next 8 years, we produced that 54-acre national award winning reinvented land port of entry called Mariposa. What an experience. What an education.
Have you ever wondered how successful architecture, engineering, and construction companies scale their business?
Or have you ever wanted guidance on how to get more growth, wealth, and freedom from your AEC company?
Well, then you're in luck. Hi, I'm Will Forat.
And I'm Justin Nagel, and we're your podcast hosts.
We interview successful AEC business leaders to learn how they use people, process, and technology to scale their businesses.
So sit back and get ready to learn from the industry's best. This is Building Scale.
Hey listeners, it's Will here. Our mission is to help the AEC industry protect itself by making technology easy. If you've ever listened to our show, then you know that the three pillars of scaling a business are people, process, and technology. So if you suspect technology is your weak link, then book a call with us to see where we can help maximize your company's IT and cybersecurity strategy. Just go to buildingscale.net/help.
Today's guest is Eddie Jones, founder of Jones Studio. He founded Jones Studio in 1979, and they are an award-winning architecture, interior design, and planning firm based in Tempe, Arizona. Go Devils! Always loved the Tempe, Arizona, for sure. He's led the firm to 240 plus design awards, including National AIA Honor Award and GSA Design Excellence Honor, recognized with the top industry honors, including AIA Arizona's Architects Medal and Fellowship in the AIA. Jones Studio specializes in sustainable, resilient design for public and private sector clients across the U.S., known for high-profile civic projects like the Mariposa Land Port Entry, and for creating strong design-build collaborations. Firm was named Firm of the Year by both AIA Arizona and AIA Western Mountain Region. And with all that fun stuff said, Eddie, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Appreciate the invitation.
Yeah, no, when I met you was at an AIA event because I got invited to it from another guy. And he said to me, oh, this is the best architect in, if not all the valley, maybe the whole country. So I was like, well, that sounds pretty good to me. So very
Just too kind.
At least here in the valley, I can tell you that.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I said all these nice things, but tell us the real story. How did you get into architecture? Tell us about Jones Studios, the beginnings, going through that. Let's hear it from the Eddie's mouth, as they say.
Well, my story is very conventional. As a child, 6-year-old child, began to, gravitate, didn't even know that word at 6 years old. Some buildings that didn't look like my house. And my mother, back in the 50s, there were these women's home magazines, and it was mid-century, right? And they were publishing this sort of new post-war style of low-pitched roofs, lots of glass. Most of it was not in Oklahoma, that's for sure. And it fascinated me, and I taught myself how to look at the photographs and figure, and the floor plans were also published, and I could identify the location in the floor plan where the photograph was taken. Eventually I could do that as a small boy, which and I was good in art at school. And so my parents said, you probably want to be an architect. And I go, okay. And then I discovered Frank Lloyd Wright, like a lot of people of my generation. And that was it. That sealed the deal. That's what I wanted to be, which is, in retrospect, as an adult, I can see that in retrospect, that was a huge advantage. because I could focus on my education. Do little kids focus on education? Well, yeah. I took every art class I could. Of course, I was interested and curious. That's probably been my greatest enduring quality, is curiosity. And so any book that had art or architecture in it, I would devour. And then junior high, there weren't any computers back then. And so one would learn mechanical drawing. That's what it was called, mechanical drawing. You had a drafting board, you had T-squares, you had triangles and pencils. And man, did I find medium of communication. I absolutely loved drawing with mechanical equipment and excelled in geometry, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, of course, you go to architecture school, and I went to Oklahoma State University and got my degree, bachelor's degree in architecture, and worked a year in Oklahoma, and just decided I've got to explore. I need a place that I can sort of become whoever I was going to become. I had to find that place, and I could tell it wasn't my hometown. It was a great place to grow up. Gosh, I had a sheltered childhood. I had parents that were supportive, but I ended up in Arizona. Why Arizona? Well, because I had seen issues of Arizona highways, probably the best uh, chamber of commerce medium ever invented, and those silhouettes of saguaros against sunsets just were so unique. And then, of course, Frank Lloyd Wright had been here, and Paolo Soleri, who came from Taliesin, was here, and I thought, well, that's it. That's good enough for me. That must be the land of opportunity, of intellectual growth, of experimentation, of anything goes, and where determination pays off. So I stupidly, again in retrospect, packed up my VW Volkswagen with my 2-year-old son and my wife and our few belongings, and drove west, and without looking back, and no support system. And we set up shop in Phoenix, and it was a great life-changing experience, and it continues to be a life-changing experience. I'm not stuck here. At my age, I have the resources to travel the world, which I do, but always returning, to the Sonoran is one of my favorite things.
So when you came to Arizona, is that when you set up Jones Studio? Is that when it all happened, or did you first work somewhere else, and then how did that work?
No, when one graduates from an architecture school, that doesn't make you an architect. There was a 3-year or 4-year apprenticeship. That's what they called it, an apprenticeship, before you were even allowed to take the exams, which you then had to pass, and then you could call yourself an architect. And so, as I said, I worked in Oklahoma City for about a year, and then, accumulated enough money to, head west. I went to work for the oldest architecture firm in Phoenix. It was called Lesher Mahoney, and Les Mahoney, his license number was 4. Mine's
Wow.
10,000 and something, and now they're in the God knows 70,000s. But he was 4, and they had just been bought by a firm out of Omaha called Dana Larson and Rubel, which is today called DLR. But I was their first employee. When Dana Larson and Rubel bought Lesher Mahoney, I was the first employee to be hired, and the other employees, the other 4 people that were there, were, I don't know, 85. They're the only job they'd ever had, and it was strange. But I was sent all over the state because Dana Larson Rubel, their bread and butter was working on what was called Indian housing for the Housing and Urban Development Department of the federal government, HUD. And so I got to, learn about all of the indigenous people and how they lived, and actually visit the villages and the reservations from one corner of this state to the other, taking photographs and doing research and getting paid for it at the same time. But again, when I look back, it had a profound influence on me. And to this day, it does. I mean, I have so much respect for the lessons that were passed on, from the Native Americans. They're still valid, even in the 21st century, and I certainly abide by them. And then, I became eligible to take the exams. I took the exams. Back then you could take them once a year, and it was a Saturday and a Sunday, and then the following weekend, another Saturday and Sunday, 8-hour days, 32 hours of testing. And I did it at the School of Architecture at ASU because they had drafting tables, and you took your test on a drafting table. And I passed all of the tests except design. But I was thrilled because I knew I could nail design. I overthought it, and that's why I failed and I didn't finish, and, nothing to it. So I waited the obligatory, maybe it was another year or two, and took that test and of course passed it. And that's when I became an architect. I continued working for what is now, no, it's still called Lesher Mahoney. And, my wife lost her job, and we had just bought a sports car, which I then had to sell immediately. And
a sports car was
it was a Jensen convertible, great car, fast, a Lotus engine, anyway, 2-seater. And the man who bought it, Chuck Tatham, he was a optometrist / attorney and very smart. And when I told him what I did, I go, "Oh, you're an architect." I go, "Yeah," but I wasn't yet. And he goes, "Well, I have some property. Would you design me a house?" Because he knew he could get a deal with this, naive kid. And I said, "Yes, I'll do it." And by the time I did do it, I had become licensed. And then we, bid it out. And of course, it was over budget. Gosh, it was 7,500 square feet on the side of a hill, and $200,000 was over budget.
All right.
I did the house with 8 sheets of paper, and I stamped every sheet. I stamped the civil drawings, the electrical drawings, the structural drawings, the architectural drawings, the plumbing drawings. Everything had my stamp on it. 8 sheets of paper. Got a permit in 2 weeks, and then it bid over budget. And Chuck said, "Well, Eddie, why don't we build it ourselves?" Sure. And I had worked in the oil fields of Oklahoma to get myself through college, and so I hadn't really built anything, but I certainly knew how to work. And of course I knew how to say yes. I knew when opportunity rose its head, I was smart enough or dumb enough to always say yes. So we did. I became a general contractor without any experience. By God, we got that house built, and it launched my career. Now, when I say launch, that sort of implies some kind of acceleration. It was far from acceleration, but it allowed me to quit my day job. And it's, my drafting table from college was already set up in my spare bedroom. And so it was that easy. I quit my job on Friday. I woke up Monday morning and I was in business. Jones Studio was in business. And I had one house to build, and I built it. And fortunately, the phone rang about a month later, and another house in Wickenburg, which I ended up building that too, because now I was a general contractor. It was the design build, didn't even know the term.
So you were doing design build 1979.
Yeah.
1980.
And it had damn near killed me because I had no employees. It was just me and my Volkswagen, which I literally drove into the ground. I mean, I had to just throw it away. And then, by then I had made friends, colleagues in the Valley, and if they needed some help, I could do a rendering, I could do a set of working drawings, and I managed to support myself and my family, if you want to call that support, having, zeroing out your checkbook every month and not having health insurance, not having any safety net whatsoever. But, I was lucky. And in 1980, I believe, my younger brother, 6 years younger, he had gone to architecture school at Oklahoma State and then went on to the University of Illinois to take advantage of a new degree that they had invented. And it was called a double master's, a master's in architecture and a master's in business administration. Man, when I was in college, well, it's the early or the mid 60s, and we were all hippies, which meant money was materialistic, and God forbid make money. And so I literally, to this day, know nothing about making money. But my brother did. And once he graduated with his double master's, he went to work for a big firm in Atlanta that did sports facilities, Erie International. And then when he felt comfortable, he moved to Arizona, and then he became my partner. And gosh, that bless his heart, he was willing to go without a paycheck for a year, pounding the pavement, as my dad would say, trying to shake something out of the trees, because again, back then it was still the good old boy network, and there were just certain firms in the valley that just got all the work. And what they weren't interested in, would kind of fall off the crumbs would fall off the table, and Neil was there to catch them. But then after about a year, Phoenix adopted a new policy for public buildings. It's taxpayer money. Therefore, the procurement of architects should be a competitive process. It should be a level playing field, which was great for Neil and I because, we really didn't have any experience other than houses, but we were able to submit a request for qualification or RFP, request for a proposal. And so we started doing that. And again, failure after failure, disappointment after disappointment. But he kept at it, and he would try to create relationships with these departments, these public departments that we were trying to, get to do their building. And finally, Arizona State Parks shortlisted us for a visitor center, interpretive center at Hamalfi Ruins State Park. Have you ever heard of it? Probably not.
Nope.
But it's a state park in Arizona that nobody's ever heard of. Perfect for us. And it's north of Winslow, and it overlooks the Hoh Valley. It used to be Hopi land, and there are a lot of Hopi remains, Anasazi remains, and that's why it's a state park. But they needed an interpretive center, a place where visitors could learn about the significance of the area. And we were shortlisted with other firms. I don't remember which other firms were there, but they saw something in us. So they saw a passion for design, certainly a respect for the land and a respect for indigenous cultures because of my experience, with working with the Hopi as well as the Navajo and the Apaches, everybody in Arizona. They leap of faith, they hired us. And to this day, that building is still dear to my heart. It was the breakthrough we needed. 2 years ago, and the building was 35 years old 2 years ago, and we submitted it for a 25-year award, an AIA 25-year award, which is given to buildings that have endured not only intact for 25 years, not messed up, by remodeling or whatever, but still intact, still original, and still serving the same purpose that they did, which is pretty rare.
Yeah.
And so we had hit the 35-year mark. I think it's about time we submitted this building. Now, mind you, remember, it was our first non-house building. And we had no money left. Of course, we just spent it all doing the best damn job we could. So it was never photographed. It never got any recognition. It was this little jewel sitting out in the middle of the painted desert that nobody knew about. And so when I started calling the Park Service and asking them, and I braced myself because I said, so how's that building doing? God damn it, it's leaking, blah, blah, blah. None of that happened. Only just the most wonderful things were said. In fact, the manager of all the northern parks said he still considers it the best visitor center in the whole system. And he said,
Wow.
you know why, Eddie? Because when I'm out, traveling in my, quad, just checking things out, I can't even see the building. It blends in so beautifully, and it's just the exact architecture that place needed. And it's made of rusted metal and stone. Why the rusted metal? It was the first time, to my knowledge, that any architect in Arizona had just taken cold rolled sheet metal and used it as a cladding. Not core 10, nothing fancy, just basic sheet metal. And I did that because I thought again, a hippie. I've got to spend the night on the site. I have to feel it. And so I took my sleeping bag, and man, the mosquitoes and the bug drove me off. But at least I was able to do a sincere, thorough walk of that site, which frankly, I got to pick out. I mean, can you imagine? I mean, your first real job, and they say, we've got like 800 acres here. Where do you think it should go? Wow. And so I got to choose the site. But anyway, to make my point, as I was exploring it, there's pot shards and there's animal bones. And of course, there's all the high desert grasses and mostly dirt. And here's this coffee can, this rusted coffee can, half buried, and it was this man-made object had been thrown there, and Mother Nature was slowly dismantling it, eating it, and taking it back. I thought, I have to use a metal material so she can start taking it back. And then the stone part, well, good grief, everything up there is made of stone. That was, the indigenous Americans just looked at what they were standing on and they built with that. No matter where the High Plains Indians, the, Southwestern, the East Coast, they all just built with what was under their feet. And so there wasn't a lot of stone on our site, but the local farmers in that part of Arizona, would till their crops and they would always dig up stone and they would stockpile it. So they gave it to us. So now we have the material for free. How do we get it onto the building? Well, just south of Winslow is a state penitentiary, and there were 5 incarcerated Masons that were more than happy to get a day off, to do their trade. And so they laid the stone. Beautiful. It's poetic. And so anyway, the building won. It won the 25-year award. And so it finally got the recognition that it deserved. And I could have not been more proud of an award than that one. And we've had, as you said, a lot of awards, but that one was super special.
So this is an unbelievable inspirational story of how you did this thing. You didn't have any money still, but it was we've done it. We've hit the big time, if you will. We've done something so,
that's only in retrospect. That's only in retrospect. At the time, you're just struggling and hoping you're going to get another job.
Yeah. So I guess that goes to the question then. So when did the studio start becoming like we've got like a real business here. Like this is a real, like this can pay people.
I'll be happy to tell you. Homology's finished, and then there's some more houses to do. Then the Bureau of Land Management hires us to do literally an outhouse out in the middle of the desert.
When nature calls, as they say.
West of New River, there's a trail from New River to Prescott. It's called the Black Canyon Trail. And it used to be where, ranchers would herd their sheep north. And it's still used as a hiking trail. today. So, hikers needed a place to park their vehicles in preparation to begin the hike. It'd be nice to have some picnic tables, and we need a restroom for them. And that was the job, a restroom. And it had to be self-sufficient. There's no electricity, no plumbing, no water, no nothing, and no maintenance. And so we designed this, and they really are beautiful, really beautiful little structures, and composting toilets, one solar collector to power things, clad in metal and concrete block construction to withstand the bullet holes that were inevitable, which to me just added to the character. It's like the patina of oxidation on the metal along with the bullet holes. It's all indigenous. And that won a lot of awards too. But the real breakthrough came when the St. Louis Cardinals national football team were asked to leave St. Louis, or they wasn't have enough of the Bidwell family. And so they moved in Tempe. Everybody wanted a football team. And so Tempe, their carrot was a free training facility. If you come to Tempe, we will give you this training facility. Now, training facilities are a big deal. I mean, that's the headquarters. That's where all the executives are. That's where all the coaches are. That's where all the players are, the locker rooms, the weight rooms, everything. And so I don't know if you've ever seen it. It's on the corner of Hardy and Warner in Tempe. And we had never done a training facility, but Neil, had that experience at Erie. And we were in association with an architect named Dave. It's jumping out of my head, but he was a Tempe architect. That was part of the criteria. You have to have a Tempe architect. Dave Kenyon. And so we were smart enough to hire a design consultant who had been on the architecture team for the Dallas Cowboys training facility. Unbeknownst to us, the vice president of the Cardinals had been with the Dallas Cowboys previously and really liked this guy. So he's on our team, and we're competing against HOK, Smith Group, all these high-powered firms, and we get the job. Man, I was that satisfied. And, it was up to me to design it. And it's like, oh, man. I mean, this was very complex programming and adjacencies and stacking. And I mean, there's no way you can screw this up because it's too serious. And so I can remember I'm on my desk, I've got the site plan. It goes, okay, I learned how to do this in school. I'm just going to do it. And the football fields, the site was an old alfalfa field in Tempe, Warner and Hardy. So it was, to the eye, it looked level, but it really, because of the irrigation of the alfalfa, it had a slope to it. And by the time you put 2 football fields on it, your level football fields on it, it created a 5-foot offset where the building was going. So I was able to site the building parallel to the football fields, which were parallel to the railroad tracks, which is why Sun Devil Stadium is oriented the way it is. And so the building kind of became a retaining wall to resolve that 5-foot offset. And if you see the building, it's a good building. The west side is where the coaches are. You would think they would want the coaches on the east side overlooking the football fields, but that sounds logical, but it's illogical. The coaches are on the field when the players are on the field, so the executives want to be able to overlook the fields. The coaches can be on the west side because the players won't be on the field, so I get that. But the thing is that it faced west in Arizona. Yet, these offices, corridor of offices wanted sunlight. So the diagram is football fields, the upper level football fields, executives, support, coaches, parking. So I gave the coaches an exterior corridor as well as an interior corridor, linking them together. Then the entire west elevation, I needed a sunscreen. I needed to let the light in, but block the heat gain. What could we use to do that? And then I was probably at I can't remember what it was called back then, but a construction supply place for another project, and I saw these terracotta fireplace chimney flue liners. That's it. Fireplace chimney flue liners laid horizontally. And they were about 16, 18 inches square with rounded corners and 24 inches deep. And you could calculate the sun as it's dropping in the western skies, that 24 inches cut it off. And just as the sun was about to penetrate the 24 inches because it's parallel, perpendicular, it dropped behind South Mountain. So I get this wall of terracotta, beautiful patterning, beautiful light and shadow. The east side, we put glass in so everybody could overlook the playing fields. There was even a special projected space that was, as you entered the building, as visitors entered the building, the focal point went into this special memorabilia room. It's where all the trophies and the old helmets and the, recognition would be displayed. And it had glass mullions. It was all glass, but to laterally brace the glass from wind load, I had like 24-inch deep glass mullions, cantilevered, because when you entered, remember the football fields are chalked lines, right? Going horizontally. And then the glass overlapping created this vertical striation. And so you get this super in position of the glass lines overlapping the horizontal lines, and it was just beautiful. And right in the middle of the room was an empty display case for the future Super Bowl trophy. I thought that was a sign of a gesture of optimism. They did, and it was removed.
I guess if you had to walk past a trophy that you didn't have, and depending on how long you didn't have said trophy, and if we run through history that we know now,
yeah, they were probably right.
That would be a rough walk every day. Okay, so you get to build this facility here, and that's the time where, okay, we have done it. Now we're rolling as a business. We're able to pay people. We're able to do all the fun stuff.
Yeah, it started to mature. Jones Studios started to mature. We were in a space on 12th Street in Campbell, a building by the great modernist Al Beadle, and we were there for 33 years, and we produced a lot of work. But as our reputation grew, so did, I suppose, public interest. And so the Scottsdale Museum of Contemporary Art asked Jones Studio to exhibit our work. That's a big deal. That's very flattering, right? Although, however, we had been asked to exhibit our work before in various venues, and I knew that it was a lot of work with very little feedback and a lot of work to put up and a lot of work to take down. Where do you store it? And so I said, I don't know. But I was still obligated to tell the studio about such an important invitation. Fortunately, it was a Friday afternoon, and back then we bought lots of beer on Friday afternoons and sat around and had fun on the conference table. And Jacob Benny, who's now my partner and owns the company, he said, well, why don't we be the exhibit? And, we all laughed and chuckled and didn't take it seriously. But on the way home, I thought, that's it. That would be worth it. We are the exhibit. They'll never go for it. They'll just say, absolutely not. We can't take the liability, blah, 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 whatever. But I pitched the idea, and they didn't hesitate to say yes. I mean, immediately they said yes. And they They built us an office in one of the galleries, and we moved in for 4 months. We sublet our space back on 12th Street in Campbell, and we were a living architecture firm exhibit in that gallery. And you can imagine how unproductive it was, but it was offset by the adjacency to people that were interested in architecture, because if you were in that gallery, you were interested in architecture. Teachers would bring school children, parents would bring their children, college students from other universities would come in. It was just great. Any one of us would do it again. But during that time, there was an RFQ announced by the federal government, by the General Services Administration, asking for proposals to do a new land port of entry, actually a modernization of an existing land port of entry called Mariposa in Nogales, 5 miles west of downtown Nogales. And I had been hired by the GSA about a year before that as a peer reviewer. And I had done peer reviews on land ports of entry in Texas. So I kind of, felt like I knew something about this. And Neil, my brother, he thought this is a waste of time. There's no way we're going to get hired for this. We don't have anything remotely you could call experience, because it's commercial trucking, it's private vehicle inspection, it's pedestrian processing. I mean, it's just this huge, monster. I don't know, Neil. I think I know something about this. And so because, we're Arizonans, it was easy to do research for, uh, Nogales, Arizona, and Nogales, Sonora. They used to be one. It used to be one city. Now it's separated by this unusual, ineffective thing called a wall. But I wrote about it. I wrote about how the population of Nogales swells on weekends, of tourists and shoppers, and then it recedes, on Sunday, only to, blossom again on the following weekend. And the locals call that ambient Nogales. Nogales, ambos Nogales, Spanish. And ironically, that's where public policy is made, on this ethereal, sort of almost imaginary population that's never truly exists. And I just thought that was beautiful. And so I wrote about that. Long story short, we get shortlisted with other firms that have way more experience. And I'm scared. So can I say shitless?
You can say shitless. You're totally welcome to.
And, we have to go to San Francisco for the interviews. And anyway, we practice, and I'm kind of feeling sick, and this is going to be a disaster. But I walk into the conference room, and one of my favorite architects and a friend is a guy named Larry Scarpa. He won the national gold medal a couple of years ago. Very good architect in Santa Monica. And he's sitting at the conference table as a peer reviewer. And he goes, "Eddie, I really like your work." And once he said that, everything just calmed down. Again, we were probably 11 people at the time, broke. I mean, we were out of work. That checkbook was getting to be zero. And it wasn't long after Christmas that our fax machine kicked in, and it was the letter saying you got the job. It's like, oh, God. That was 2007. Of course, then January comes along, and then it's 2008, and then comes along the recession.
The crash.
Yeah,
the
crash happened.
And here we are, little Jones Studio with the largest construction project in Arizona, and all of our best architects being laid off or shutting their doors. So we cherry picked all the best architects. And over the next 8 years, we produced that 54-acre national award-winning reinvented land port of entry called Mariposa. What an experience. What an education. I mean, it was trial by fire, but we did it. And it was so successful And how do you measure success in the land port of entry? In a way, it was easy to improve because the existing port had been designed and built in 1973, and now it was 2008. And you can imagine how the capacity was designed for a certain number of trucks. Well, the NAFTA treaty changed all of that. So now we're getting produce trucks from South America, Central America, as well as Mexico. And Tucson is perfectly positioned for a truck to access the interstate highway system that branches out into the United States. And so it was over capacity. Customs and Border Protection, the tenants, were doing a valiant job of keeping up with the security protocols and the number of trucks and people. I mean, it was massive. Our challenge, and remember, we don't have any experience, and we're 11 people, but now we grew to 24. We have to redesign, modernize, tear down, rebuild this land port of entry without ever shutting it down. But that's why they're so expensive. But we did it. And of this dust bowl that we encountered when we first visited the site, the truck fumes. I mean, because these trucks are waiting 10 hours. Now imagine how much exhaust is created in 10 hours of trucks idling. And then you've got the heat, and there's no nature. I mean, it was just all dirt and pavement, which radiated even more heat. And so immediately we decided, this place needs a garden. It needs, this port needs to be in a garden, which cleans the air, which absorbs the heat, which will, show respect, for the visitors as well as the truckers. And we literally reinvented how one approaches the design of a land port of entry. And it was all based on one sentence out of a poem. The border is what connects us, not what separates us. And as long as you have that positive attitude about this being a unifier, then you can do things that you wouldn't think of if you thought it was a separator. And so we do a garden. We use the buildings to create the security barriers rather than relying on razor wire and barbed wire. The architecture created a compound. And the best part, though, is how do you irrigate a 54-acre garden when the little town of Nogales has a weak water system, and it rains infrequently in south, not to mention here. And so we created a 1 million gallon underground water storage tank. And the first monsoon filled that storage tank to capacity, and it's never been empty since. And we have this beautiful, lush garden that people enter into. Now, I don't know if you've ever crossed a border, but personal inspection sucks. No matter what color you are, it sucks. And so, but when you're entering this inspection zone through a garden, the fear, the anxiety drops, which allows the officers, the CBP officers, their anxiety level drops. Things go smoothly. And it does. Rarely is there a confrontation. There are seizures, of course, but you'd be surprised how peaceful land ports of entry are all up and down the southern border. And we're on our 8th one now, so I know what I'm talking about. And so beware of those 6 o'clock news cycles during election cycles, because it's a lot of BS comes out of that. But anyway, that we really grew up on the Mariposa job, and we've never looked back. And I guess we're now getting pigeonholed in land ports of entry because, like I said, we're on our 8th one. But they're fun. Because the complexity just causes you to, think, and the issues and the challenges are so diverse that the only way you can get through it is through creative thought process. You can't think conventionally. And then you have all the interaction with the CBP officers and the GSA people. And it's just tons of people, not to mention the sister cities. So it's impactful. It's very impactful work. I think we make a huge difference. And that's why I get up in the morning.
One thing you mentioned was Jacob, one of the people that came up as you're going through this process. So obviously there's a succession plan in place, and you and Neil said, hey, we need to pass this down. So why was that the decision that needed to be made? But then also Jacob and what other partners that are there, why were they the chosen ones, if you will?
I'm glad you asked that question, because it gives me an opportunity to brag about my incredible partners, not to mention the entire staff here at Jones Studio. But I've never been one to overthink business. Years ago, gosh, I can't remember how long ago it was, but we would have him. I hate to use the word employee interviews, but we would interview the friends that worked at Jones Studio. Jacob had come as an intern while he was still at school. Brian came as an intern while he was still in school. And I was sort of his mentor at U of A on his thesis project. And Neil and I knew right away these guys were special. And but anyway, they had been working with us, and they're one of the reasons we were doing so well. And Brian said first, he said, I want a title, because his business card was just Brian Farling, Jones Studio, Jacob Binney, Jones Studio, Eddie Jones, Jones Studio. Had a title? You want a title? Yeah, because my friends, and we're parties, and I just would like to be recognized as something more than just an employee. I go, gosh, that I never thought of that, Brian. Thank you for mentioning that. Let me give that some thought. And Jacob did the same thing. And so Neil and I talked afterwards. I said, Neil, it's you and I, we're going to be getting up in the years pretty soon. And can you imagine, that if you retire and I drop dead, there's nothing, that they would have to shut the doors. And can you imagine dedicating half your life to a studio, a company, and then the doors shut and you're 50 years old? And I go, that just doesn't seem responsible. It doesn't seem right. We should do something about that. So and then I guess so Neil, he loves to do research. And so this word succession came up. There's a word for it. And we hired a consultant to help, who specialized in architecture firm succession plans, and good advice, great advice. We got an attorney, and this and that. And slowly we sold off some stock, so they became partners. So there were 4 partners, Neil and I and Brian and Jacob. Then recently, within the last 2 years, Neil knew he was going to retire this year. And I thought, well, I'm not going to retire, but, I can sell my stock too and stick around. And that's what we did. And they became the owner principals of Jones Studio. I'm still the founding principal. And so when I drop dead, this place will go on. If they want to change the name, they can change the name. I don't care. I just want them to have a home, and they will have a home. Next question.
Well, I mean, so, when you talk about succession, initially started with title. Eventually you went through and thought about, well, what happens after us, which is, being an empathetic leader. That's almost like a requirement. Was this about legacy at all?
No, it wasn't. But being from Oklahoma, and my parents were part of the greatest generation, they taught me, the saying is, don't toot your own horn. And I'm very uncomfortable tooting my own horn, thanks to mom and dad. This is a legacy firm. By sheer longevity. You've got much larger firms in Phoenix, in the Valley, You don't have too many that are older than Jones Studio. Smith Group and Gensler, we were here before they were, even though they're older firms, from somewhere else, but we were here before they were. In fact, Gensler's here because of us. We partnered with them on a project on the ASU campus, which gave them a foothold in the valley. And then I think, because I am going to toot my horn now, because the integrity of Jones Studio, the values we have, and the fact that we've sustained those values for always putting the architecture first, the community first, people first, has a reputation, an authentic reputation for excellence. And that should not be squandered. Brian and Jacob and everybody outside this room in this studio is very capable of continuing and carrying on this value system. They wouldn't be here unless they agreed with the value system. They wouldn't be here if they didn't enjoy getting the tough projects. We are not for everybody. There has to be a compatibility for us to sign up on this adventure called architecture. We've only got one project in our entire portfolio that was with a developer, and it turned out great. It's an excellent project, but we never got hired by a developer again. And they have different values, right? I mean, everything's business. Everything has a profit. If you got to spend this much money, then you have to make at least this much money, no matter what. And so that's just not what we do. But to answer your question, I admit that this is a legacy firm and it deserves to continue. And I have no doubt that it will. Probably even better. They'll get better. They'll soar even higher.
Did they, going from architect to business owner, right? Like, that's not like an overnight thing. Very different responsibilities. How long, maybe it's a continual thing, how long before Jacob and Brian were ready to be a partner and really take on the role of ownership and all the responsibilities? What did they have to go through, or still going through?
Yeah.
Or to trust that they could be responsible enough?
Well, once we sold them 5% of the stock, you could see it. I mean, it's remarkable, isn't it? This little thing that this skin in the game, as they say, even if it's just a little bit of skin in the game, makes a huge difference. I don't know. I don't think it's comes from fear of failure. Oh my God, I got skin in the game and I can't lose my skin. It's like, I have responsibility. I mean, I own something, and I think that was very positive. And they immediately began to grow as leaders. They already were, but I could see a difference in the attitude. And so by the time, Neil and I were ready to let go of ownership, they were ready. And having said that, Neil retires, Jacob takes over the business, Brian does all the heavy lifting with design. I'm still doing master plans for all the ports, and sometimes, and I'll design all the buildings, and then Brian will design all the buildings for this port. It's split very well. It's very organic split too. It's almost like who's available. But man, again, that it was one thing to see their beautiful growth with just 5% of the company. Now that they've got 100% of the company, oh my God, it's the same things happening, only in a much larger sphere. And I love it. I mean, it's just something. Too bad everybody can't witness what I'm witnessing. It's just thrilling and fulfilling at the same time.
That's beautiful. It's really cool to hear the organic, transition, and then how you get to still have a front row seat to the growth. That's amazing, which actually puts us in a good position for our last question that we love to ask people.
Okay.
If you could go back 20 years, Eddie, what would you tell yourself? What advice would you give 20 years ago, Eddie, that you think would be impactful for 2005 Eddie?
Well, in a way, I get to do that all the time because I have students, that come in and they want to know, how did you do it? And what advice do you have? And they are 30, 40 years, 50 years younger than I am. And so it gives me a moment to reflect. It's pretty simple. I succeeded, and my definition of succeeding is that you get to have fun your entire life. Was it ever work? No, I never worked because I was having too much fun. Were there down times and hard times and failures? Yes, but it was all part of the soup that just made life so enriching. And so I tell students, you can't do this for the money. And if I were talking to a law student, I would tell them the same thing. Or a ditch digger student, you can't do it for the money. You have to love it. If you love it, the money will come. I promise you the money will come. But first you have to love it. And so 20 years ago, I was already living that advice that maybe I did verbalize in my head. I've always said my greatest quality was naivete. I never thought what could go wrong. I never learned to fear. Looking back, it's like, oh my God, what was I thinking? Phew, that was a close one. But there's a lot to be said about naivete and curiosity and having the courage to say yes. Believe in yourself.
All right. Well put. This has been a ton of fun. If somebody wanted to get a hold of you, is there a good way for them to do that?
Well, we have a website, I'm told.
Yeah.
And I guess we have all of those social media connections. Kirsten will be happy to share those with you.
I'll put all those in the show notes.
Our address is easily accessible and our door is always open, and I never say no to a young person that wants to talk. Most young people are wanting a job, but we can't hire everybody. But I say, but nevertheless, if you want to come in and talk about my favorite subject, architecture, let's do it. And
all right. Like I said, I'll throw website and all your socials in the show notes there. This has been a ton of fun.
Yes, it is. Thank you.
I've been very inspired. I think about just say yes to things, be silly enough to say yes to things maybe from time to time, and great things will happen. Like I said, this has been a blast. And until next time, listeners, adios.
Adios.
Thanks for listening to Building Scale. To help us reach even more people, please share this episode with a friend, a colleague, or on social media.
Remember, the 3 pillars of scaling a business are people, process, and technology.
And our mission is to help the AEC industry protect itself by making technology easy.
So if you think your company's technology pillar could use some improvement, book a call with us to see how we can help maximize your IT and cybersecurity strategy. Just go to buildingscale.net/help.
And until next time,
keep building scale.